You ever get that feeling like there's a hidden current, something shaping the world around us?
Yeah, definitely.
Well, that's what we're diving into today. We're exploring global intercession,
Hmm.
and the sources we've gathered, they depict it as this surprisingly potent, often unseen force. Behind global missions, yes, but also maybe connected to breakthroughs in our own lives, personal, professional.
It's really remarkable how these different sources shine a light on it. You see, like calls to action for everyone, solid scriptural foundations,
Right.
historical examples showing the impact,
Yeah.
practical ways it becomes, our individual responsibility.
And some frame it strategically, yeah, like in
Yeah,
spiritual engagement.
exactly. That too. While others really emphasize the lifelong nature of this whole prayer journey.
Okay. So our goal for you today, listening in, is to kind of cut through the complexity, really grasp what global intercession is, why these sources argue it's so important, and crucially, how it can become like a tangible part of your life, whether you're deep in ministry or focused on your career.
Doesn't matter.
Right. We think there are some genuine aha moments here,
Yeah.
especially about the untapped potential of prayer for global impact, sure, but maybe even for navigating those professional sticking points.
Absolutely. Lots to unpack.
Okay, let's get into it.
So let's start by maybe reframing how we see prayer, because often we think of it as, private,
Well,
quiet.
yeah, the default image.
But what's compelling here is how it's presented as like a vital instrument for global missions, a direct active response to the Great Commission in Matthew 28.
Right, where Jesus tells his followers basically, go make disciples of all nations.
Exactly. So prayer isn't just passive hope.
No.
It's presented as proactive engagement in a spiritual movement.
Yeah.
One source even talks about this vast untapped power within collective prayer.
Wow.
Yeah, like each prayer is both a shield and a sword against global challenges.
It definitely challenges that typical quiet image of prayer, doesn't it?
It really does. And interestingly, this isn't just limited to purely religious stuff. One source we looked at draws a direct line to your professional life,
Really? How so?
suggesting that global intercession, it could actually be a key to overcoming career plateaus.
Huh. That's unexpected.
Well, the idea isn't just about, like, personal success for its own sake. It's more about finding a more purposeful way to engage with the world, aligning your daily work with this commitment to praying for the world. What do you think about that connection?
I mean, it resonates. The idea that faith isn't just, a Sunday thing.
Yeah.
It can be a powerful influence everywhere, including work.
Mm-hmm.
It shifts the focus, doesn't it? From just my ambition to seeing my work as part of something bigger, like a lifelong dedication to global prayer. It changes how you might look at Monday morning.
It certainly does, yeah. Okay, so now let's dig into this idea of strategic global intercession as the largely unseen engine powering the whole worldwide Christian mission.
The unseen engine, I like that.
These sources argue goes way beyond the visible stuff,
Yeah.
the service projects, the outreach, the things we usually think of first.
Right, like there's this foundational spiritual layer doing the heavy lifting underneath.
Precisely. And the sources, they really get into the biblical basis for this, highlighting passages like 1 Timothy 2.1-4.
Oh yeah, the one urging prayers for everyone. Leaders, all people.
That's the one. And the sources stress, this isn't just a nice suggestion, it underscores God's active desire, his desire for the salvation of all people.
So intercession becomes like participating directly in God's plan for the world.
Exactly. A universal responsibility, they'd say.
Okay.
And to kind of back this up, they give historical examples. We see Daniel's prayers linked to big outcomes for his people.
Right, in the Old Testament.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Paul's constant prayers for the churches he started, those were seen as crucial support.
So these aren't just old stories. They're presented as proof, almost, that prayer has real impact. Historically.
Proof might be a strong word, but certainly strong evidence presented in the sources.
Yeah.
One source even uses this really vivid image, a grand celestial engine and global intercession. Those are the finely tuned gears working to align our hearts with God's purposes and actually shifting the spiritual atmosphere.
Wow, that's a powerful visual, shifting the atmosphere.
It is. And the key insight here, I think, is the partnership between the visible and the invisible.
Meaning
Meaning the Great Commission isn't just about physically going somewhere. It's this comprehensive call that includes prayer, right alongside the travel, the sacrifice, the cultural engagement.
So the outward stuff is actually fueled, empowered by this hidden network of prayer.
That's the idea presented, this worldwide network of believers praying.
Okay, so It's not just an abstract idea. It's something we're meant to actively do. How do these sources suggest the listeners can actually do that? Cultivate this lifestyle of strategic prayer.
Yeah, that's the crucial next step, isn't it? The sources offer several really concrete actions. First, intentional prayer planning.
Okay, planning prayer.
Yeah, like setting aside specific times.
Yeah.
And using resources, prayer maps, mission reports to make our prayers more targeted, more informed.
Right, so it moves prayer from just a general wish, God bless the world, to something focused.
Exactly. More precise. Like any important work, planning helps. Using prayer maps. That sounds like a way to connect with specific needs really tangibly.
Yeah, makes it less abstract. What else?
Another big one is community engagement. Forming or joining prayer groups, locally, online.
The power of praying together.
Right. The principle is synergy. Shared insights, collective focus. It achieves more than we often can alone.
Strength in numbers, but for the spiritual side. And I guess connecting with others keeps you motivated too, right? And informed.
Absolutely. Keeps the momentum going. Then the sources also introduce integrating prophetic insight.
Prophetic insight, what does that mean in this context?
It's about being open to, discerning God's direction, understanding his perspective on global events, emerging needs, and aligning our prayers with that understanding. Listening, basically.
Okay, so not just talking, but listening for guidance in prayer.
And then there's the emphasis on persistent intercession, recognizing that big spiritual challenges, they often yield to consistency, not just dramatic, one-off prayer moment.
Right, showing up regularly, even when you don't see immediate results. That's a tough one sometimes, but yeah, impact often takes time.
Absolutely. And finally, the sources really stress how global intercession bridges theory and practice in mission work. They give examples. Tangible, positive changes in local churches, communities, happening after focused prayer.
So real-world consequences, it's not just theoretical.
Exactly. It grounds the whole concept.
Now, you mentioned earlier one source talks about an ancient echo resounding through time. What's the importance of looking back, historically?
Yeah. This part really digs into the historical roots of prayer and missions. Goes way back, biblical figures. It highlights Abraham's intercession for Sodom, Genesis 18, as a prime example of God actually desiring partnership with us through prayer.
Right, Abraham haggling with God, basically. It's such a striking story. It shows prayer isn't just a one-way street.
Exactly, not just requests. And then it moves to prophets like Isaiah, Jeremiah, how they wrestled with God in prayer for their nations.
Passionate prayers, not just reciting things.
Right. These weren't just quiet repetitions. They were deep, passionate engagements with God of the state of their world.
So it's showing that this idea of actively praying for others, for whole communities, it has really deep roots in faith history.
Precisely. And then, of course, the sources point to Jesus himself, his life as the embodiment of prayerful purpose. They highlight examples, Luke 5, Luke 6, that intense prayer in Gethsemane in Matthew 26, showing how prayer was the very source, the wellspring of his ministry and authority.
That's powerful. Even Jesus, with his divine nature, prayer was central. It really underlines its importance for everyone else then.
It absolutely does. And this connects directly back to the Great Commission, Matthew 28. The sources emphasize the divine authority Jesus talks about there. That empowers the command. And prayer is presented as the key way believers tap into that authority.
Okay, so prayer isn't just like a helpful add-on to missions work. It's foundational. It's how you access the power needed for it.
That's the argument. Yeah. It reinforces that point strongly.
So this ancient echo, it really establishes that prayer has always been the life force, the invisible engine, this hidden partnership with the divine behind mission.
Exactly. It gives it historical weight, shows it's not a new idea. Okay, now another key concept that comes up is every believer as a sacred portal. What's that getting at?
This shifts the focus, doesn't it? It's about who is called to do this intercession. The sources bring up the New Testament idea, 1 Peter 2.9. Every believer being part of a royal priesthood.
Right.
It's framed as a universal invitation, not just for pastors or leaders, but for everyone who follows Christ to get involved in intercession.
That's a pretty big shift from the Old Testament way of thinking, isn't it? Where access was more restricted.
Yeah. The sources explain how Christ's work basically tore down the barriers, gave every believer direct access to God, which makes intercession, well, a collective responsibility, not just for a select few.
And they loop back to those earlier examples, right? Abraham, the prophets. But now framing them as examples of this sacred duty that's now open to all believers, it really broadens the scope of who an intercessor is.
It does, and the sources really push the global implications of this. If every believer has this access and responsibility, well, the potential reach in prayer is massive, truly worldwide, reaching the ends of the earth for people who are lost or suffering.
So it's not just about my personal prayer list.
Yeah,
It's recognizing I'm part of this huge global network of intercessors.
exactly. And what are some of the practical ways they suggest we can actually move towards this global engagement in prayer? How do we do that?
Good question. They offer practical steps, like intentional prayer focus, using guides, resources, praying with purpose.
We talked about that a bit with planning.
Right. Also, community collaboration, actively joining prayer groups, sharing the load, amplifying the impact.
Makes sense.
And beyond just praying, they suggest advocacy through action, letting our prayers actually motivate us to do something tangible, supporting missions, justice work.
Okay, I like that connection. Prayer leading to action. It's not passive.
Definitely not.
Right.
And finally, mentorship and intercession, encouraging others, equipping them in this, helping grow the network.
That symphony of collective impact analogy they use, it really captures the power when everyone plays their part, doesn't it?
It really does. Okay, now let's tackle something that can feel a bit heavy sometimes. The reality of spiritual warfare.
Yeah.
How do the sources position global intercession within that?
Yeah, they don't shy away from it. They paint a picture of the world at this crossroads of light and darkness, saying, despite the gospel spreading, there are still these persistent spiritual strongholds. And this is where strategic prayer becomes vital, framed as an essential tool in a spiritual battle. They point straight to Ephesians 6.12, the reminder that our fight isn't just against flesh and blood.
Right. It's important to get that the sources are clear. This conflict isn't merely human, it's against spiritual forces of evil. That understanding really shapes why they advocate for prayer so strongly. It's not just asking for nice things, it's active engagement in a spiritual conflict.
And they bring up biblical examples again, right? Precedents of strategic intercession.
Yes. Moses praying for Israel during battle, Jesus seeking solitude for prayer before big moments, the early church praying intensely at Pentecost, all shown as examples where focused prayer led to significant spiritual results.
Okay, so how do we actually practice this strategic prayer according to the sources?
They give some concrete guidance. First, identifying and understanding the battlefield.
What does that involve?
It means staying informed about global issues, yes, but also cultivating spiritual sensitivity, listening to the Holy Spirit, understanding what's happening on both the visible and the invisible levels.
So not praying blind. Understanding the spiritual landscape. Makes sense. And then how do we engage?
They talk about praying with focus and intent, using methods like prayer mapping, forming prayer partnerships, setting aside focused time, and crucially, integrating prayer with action.
There's that connection again.
Yeah, letting our prayers drive us to advocacy, service, mentoring, even how we integrate faith into our jobs.
It all circles back to prayer not being separate, but informing and driving our actions. And ultimately, it's about prayer's role in, breaking down barriers and cultivating global hope.
Exactly, in the face of that spiritual battle. Which leads us nicely into a bit more detail on mapping the spiritual battlefield. How do we get more deliberate and informed in this?
Right. It builds on that idea of understanding the terrain. The sources stress understanding the spiritual climate through research. They even mention specific tools like Operation World, the Joshua Project.
Oh yeah, those are great resources.
For gaining insight into, dominant religions, cultural values, local challenges all around the world.
That research feels key. It helps make prayers less generic, more specific to the actual context.
Definitely. And then it comes back to identifying spiritual strongholds. Again, Ephesians 6.12. Focusing prayer on dismantling those specific spiritual barriers hindering the gospel or causing injustice.
And in this strategic approach, the sources really highlight anchoring prayer in Scripture, using God's own promises and principles to guide our prayers, aligning them with His revealed will. It gives our prayers a solid foundation.
It's a good reminder. Our prayers aren't just our own wish list. They're rooted in God's word. What else is key to this spiritual mapping?
Persistence comes up again, crucial for breakthroughs. They point to that parable of the persistent widow in Luke 18.
Right, keep knocking.
Yeah. And then the power of corporate prayer, Matthew 18. The amplified impact when believers pray together in agreement.
So it's a mix. Individual informed prayer plus the collective power of the community. And practically, how do they suggest we actually map and navigate this battlefield?
They offer concrete steps, Do the research, cultivate spiritual sensitivity, strategically address those strongholds in prayer, cultivate persistence, don't give up easily, and foster corporate unity, pray together. It's a very hands-on approach they advocate.
Okay. Now, the sources also frame this whole thing as a lifelong journey of divine partnership. How does that change the perspective on commitment?
It really shifts it, emphasizes that prayer and mission, they aren't short-term projects, not just when we feel like it. They're meant to be a continuous, lifelong thing.
Right.
The sources talk about this heartbeat of a lifelong commitment, pointing to examples like Abraham, Jesus, the early church in Acts, people who prayed consistently throughout their lives.
So it's less like a task, more like an ongoing conversation, a partnership with God that lasts a lifetime.
Exactly. And it highlights the ongoing nature of the mission itself. The Great Commission is continuous, right? So the call to global intercession embedded within it is also continuous. It's not just praying for the start of something, but sustaining it.
Okay. So weaving prayer into the fabric of life, a natural, consistent response to world needs and God's call. What are some of the underlying ideas here?
Well, intercession becomes a lifestyle, a conscious choice to invite God into everything. It bridges the personal and the universal. My prayer life connects to the global mission, and ultimately it's transformative. It shapes us and it shapes the world as we keep at it.
And how do they suggest we practically embrace this call to pray globally for the long haul?
Cultivating that lifelong habit through daily devotion, consistent prayer, establishing rhythms, personal ones, but also corporate ones, using digital tools maybe to connect with others, and actively integrating prayer with mission efforts, partnerships, learning, mentoring, making it foundational.
Now, one source has this really strong phrasing. Taking up our role in strategic prayer isn't just an invite, but a sacred commission to shape history with heaven's perspective. That sounds big.
It is big. It really elevates the stakes. The sources explain the Greek word for intercession, and tupixis, suggests something deliberate, like a watchman on guard duty.
Active, not passive.
Right. Reinforces the reality of spiritual warfare and our active role in it.
So, seeing ourselves as participants in God's work, not just spectators, what about reclaiming the church's role?
They highlight examples like Daniel 9, the church praying for Peter in Acts 12, the prayers like incense in Revelation, all pointing to this idea that God's big moves on earth are often kicked off, catalyzed by the persistent, purposeful prayer of his people. The church as the intercessory force of heaven.
Wow. Okay, so how do we step into that role with that kind of intention?
Several practical paths. First, educate yourself. Use the resources. Understand the needs, the spiritual landscape. Second, pray specifically. Use scripture. Pray for open doors, for protection for believers.
Not just general prayers.
All right. Third, partner with missionaries, mission organizations. See your prayers as direct support. Fourth, engage in corporate prayer. There's power in unity. Fifth, make prayer your first response to news, to world events. And finally, start small, but be consistent. Don't get overwhelmed.
That's a really comprehensive call to action, moving from just thinking about prayer to actually doing it strategically. And one source suggests joining a global prayer challenge. What's that about?
Yeah, the idea is to bridge the gap between awareness and action, moving into daily focused intercession. The sources stress why focused prayer matters, pointing to biblical times when God clearly responded to specific prayers. Esther, Daniel, the early church.
Okay, so it's about being intentional, putting prayer into action. What are the steps in this challenge?
Pretty straightforward. Choose a specific region or country, personalize it. Inform your prayers, use resources to understand the needs there, dedicate time daily, even 5 minutes. Consistency is key. And share your commitment, encourage others, multiply the effort.
That sounds really doable. Focus, get informed, be consistent, bring others along. Is there a suggested structure, like week by week?
Yeah, they suggest a possible rhythm. Maybe week 1, pray for an unreached people group using Joshua Project. Week 2, global leaders. Week 3, missionaries. Week 4, establish your own personal global prayer rhythm. It just gives some structure.
A starting point.
Exactly. The main goal is using the challenge to kickstart a lifelong habit.
Got it. Now, circling back to that unseen engine idea, one source talks about fueling the unseen engine. What are the actionable steps there for intercession?
Right. They really hammer home that prayer is this strategic partnership. Actionable insights include keeping a prayer journal, track prayers, see answers, using prayer apps, Operation World, Joshua Project, others for current needs.
Using the tech available.
Yeah. Partnering with mission organizations, connect your prayers to real work. And again, sharing the call, encourage others, multiply the movement. Hebrews 10 reference there about spurring each other on.
So be deliberate, use tools, connect with the community, inspire others. And they mentioned historical examples too. Moravian student volunteer
Yeah,
movement.
powerful stories. The Moravian 100-year prayer meeting, the
Oh.
impact of the SVM, the Korean revival,
hmm
all presented as examples of what happens when ordinary people commit to extraordinary prayer. Powerful reminders.
It really drives home the potential. So the overall vibe is this is a marathon, not a sprint. One final section calls it the ongoing call to prayer and mission, a lifelong journey. Key takeaways there.
Yeah, reinforcing that the continuous rhythm, not isolated events, they point to the theological roots, prayer as the lifeblood of mission, right from Genesis through the New Testament. Prayer is a lifelong posture.
A posture.
Yeah, steady, strategic, sacrificial, sustained, yeah, like Anna in the temple in Luke 2, just there,
Right.
praying.
Oh.
And again, the collective power, that symphony of souls image.
It's a beautiful picture, all these prayers rising together and practical ways to live this lifelong call.
Establish those lifelong rhythms. Anchor it in community prayer groups. Stay informed, stay engaged, mark milestones, celebrate the breakthroughs you see, and disciple others, pass it on, make it sustainable, deeply rooted.
And the final message seems really strong, this bold call to global transformation, rediscovering prayer's power in a kingdom age. What's the core of that?
It's about seeing the revolution hidden in stillness, in prayer. Redefining impact beyond just visible metrics, focusing on kingdom transformation, which often starts hidden, like with Elijah or Jesus. They reiterate the theology of intercessory authority, Abraham, Moses, Daniel, changing things through prayer. They touch on prayer in the digital age, sacred resistance against distraction, and explore how prayer transforms identities, cultures, like the Moravians, the underground church in China, renews vision, releases power, James 5:1-6.
So our prayers can create real, lasting change, even if we don't see it immediately. Practical steps for that kind of transformational prayer life.
Create a sacred space physically, mentally. Build a rhythm. Use tools wisely. Don't let them distract. Think globally. Pray specifically. And disciple others. The focus shifts to legacy, not just influence, eternal impact.
And it all leads to this idea of prayer in motion, crafting a spirit-fueled life, where prayer and purpose converge. What are the key parts of that integrated life?
Establishing a daily intercession ritual, seeing prayer as alignment with God, community engagement, again, amplified impact together, purpose-driven planning, integrating prayer into strategy, workflows, even praying for stakeholders, lifelong learning about prayer, mission, leadership, and redefining fruitfulness with a kingdom scorecard,
Right.
looking beyond earthly results.
And that final thought, a sacred pause, not a period. It's not an ending, but a recommissioning. What's the takeaway they want us to hold on to?
Yeah, exactly. It's a call to keep going. The world still needs transformation, Romans 8 says. Our work isn't done. Redefine legacy, not just success, but eternal significance birthed in prayer, stewarded in faith. They give practical fuel. Reignite commitment. Harness prayer power, schedule it, inform it, make it global. Step boldly into faith-driven action and innovation. Redefine success by kingdom impact. It ends with this powerful image, the sound of a praying generation awakening. And a final charge, step into the stream of prayer and mission, lifelong devotion, lifelong impact. 2 Chronicles 16:9.
Okay, so as we kind of wrap up this deep dive into global intercession, the big takeaway for you listening is really the profound, multifaceted power of prayer as a truly vital part of faith. These sources, they've shown is not just passive, it's an active force with real implications for the world and maybe for your own life too. It's been a focused look, and we hope you've had some genuine insights, some aha moments connecting these ideas to your own journey.
Absolutely. And as you reflect on all this, maybe just consider this. What's one small, actionable step you could take, like today, to bring more intentional global intercession into your life? Maybe it's choosing one country to pray for this week, setting a daily reminder on your phone, or maybe just looking up one of those resources we mentioned, like Joshua Project.
That's a great challenge to leave everyone with. This deep dive, it really is just scratching the surface, isn't it? Understanding the depths of prayer's impact.
Just the beginning.
We really encourage you to embrace this ongoing journey, this divine partnership, and keep exploring how your prayers can genuinely make a difference in the world.